Presently, we know Texas as a state in the United States of America. Way back in the late 17th century, the Spanish began to settle in what is now present-day Mexico and Texas, setting up missions. For decades, the population slowly rose, and the Texas land did not offer much in return. It was very dry and hot, so not too great for farming, and unfortunately for the Europeans, no gold. Borders with America were vague, and throughout the 19th century, land disputes between Spain and the United States resulted in tension. As a result, on February 18, 1819, Spain and America signed the APUSH Treaty, also known as the Transcontinental Treaty. The treaty established borders and gave Florida to America, and Texas became part of Spain. Several years later, the Mexican Constitution in 1824 officially declared Texas, along with many other small Spanish states, a part of Mexico. After 1824, immigration into Texas started to soar. For every new immigrant that arrived and settled in Texas, they were awarded land as an effort from the government to boost economics. Cotton soon became a common plant grown in these farms by the immigrants, but with farmland comes labor. Texans soon amassed many slaves. Historian Paul Lack writes about how free slaves from America would flee into Texas in search of a free life, and Texas would greet them with open arms. But right when they crossed the border, the Texans would enslave them. In 1829, a slave known as Tom made his way to Texas to start a free life from America. Unfortunately for him, within the first week he was there, two white brothers captured Tom after he inquired about having a job as a silversmith at their farm. Stories like this continued to occur throughout the early 19th century in Texas. The Mexican government disapproved of slavery, and unlike the Southern American states, slavery was not totally essential and vital to the Mexican and Texan economies. So on September 19, 1829, Mexican President Guerrero passed what he called the Guerrero Decree, which said that slavery is abolished in the Republic. In addition, those who have been now considered slaves are free. This abolishment of slavery ultimately led to what is now known as the Texas Revolution. What we see after the Guerrero Decree is the Texas Revolution starting to unfold. To the Texans, more slavery meant more money. And throughout human history, money is the utmost important aspect of life. Money runs countries, businesses, health, education, personal enjoyment, and infinitely many more things. In the 19th century in Texas, slaves were a core of the farming industry. And when the Mexican government takes that away, the results are apparent. After the Guerrero Decree, revolts in Texas broke out. After months of protests and revolts, President Guerrero granted Texas exemption from the act. Slavery was once again legal in Texas, but the relationship between Mexico and Texas would continue to disintegrate. On April 6 of 1830, the Mexican government and President Anastasio Bustamante once again upset Texas by laws which imposed import tariffs on American goods coming into Texas. The laws also banned any immigration of people from America, including slaves and Native Americans. These laws further upset the Texans, who wanted immigrants and slaves for their economy. In the early 1800s, newly elected President Santa Anna turned to a dictatorship.
The soldier and politician Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna was elected president. He won his election off his support for federalism, and then in 1834 completely swapped sides when he ordered the disarmament of all civic militias, dissolved Congress, and in 1835 repealed the Mexican Constitution. Santa Anna was a dictator.
Fearing a total dictatorship, people all across Mexico, including Texans, formed small armies to counter Santa Anna. He easily crushed all rebellions. Flamboyant Texan military leader Sam Houston began building an army to counter this.
He was probably one of the most difficult, the most irascible, the most principled, the most opinionated man in American history. He was flamboyant. He wore vests that were furry, or he would have on a jacket, and on top of that, an Indian blanket. He was the first man to wear beads on the floor of the United States Senate. I like that.
On December 12, 1835, Sam Houston, commander of the Texas Army, released a proclamation looking for volunteers to fight in the Army. He instills a sense of propaganda on the Texans by saying that they have reclaimed and rendered Texas as a cultivated country. For those who enlist in the Army, Houston promises them money and upwards of 800 acres of land. He urges Texans to defend their rights and send the opposition into the soil. He finishes up by saying, "We must meet the enemy with an army worthy of our cause, which will reflect our honor upon free men." Texas soon amassed an army to fight. After 6 months of fighting, the revolution finally came to an end on April 21st, 1836, when Sam Houston and his army defeated and captured President Santa Anna at the Battle of San Jacinto. Sam Houston was then elected president of Texas in September of 1836. Texas became an independent nation after the Constitution of the Republic of Texas was written in March of 1836. The Constitution was modeled off the American Constitution and shared some similarities. But as we know, slavery was an important driving force for the Texans' desire for revolution, and that became very apparent in the Constitution. Still controversial today, Section 9 and the General Provisions part of the Constitution focused deeply on slavery in the new nation. First, it recognized that all slaves who are now held in bondage should remain in the like of state servitude. In the new nation of Texas, they refused to release existing slaves. The Constitution also says, "No free person of African descent, either whole or in part, shall be permitted to reside permanently in the Republic without consent of Congress." Section 9 of the Texas Constitution displayed the Texans' century-old mindset that required slavery. The Constitution also addresses the fact that if immigrants came from America with slaves, those slaves would remain in bondage. Texas did not pass a law prohibiting slaves coming into Texas. After Texas became an independent nation, one of the first things they included was to make sure slavery was still an institution. But this would be somewhat of an obstacle for Texas in the years following when they would try to join America.
As an independent entity, they would be free to join the United States, where slavery was legal. But oh, the irony. Slavery, which had greatly influenced their bid for independence, now practically extinguished any chances they had for statehood. Because back in the U.S., Congress was grappling with the spread of slavery as their nation expanded westward. Annexation of Texas would bring in another slave state. As Congress debated how to maintain the balance, Texas remained in a state of limbo.
The legacy of the Texas Revolution, which is known as a proud achievement by the Texans, is somewhat controversial and tainted with the stains of slavery and racism as a driving incentive for becoming an independent nation. The Mexicans disapproved of slavery and the Texans rebelled. The tragedy we see in that era of history is the racism and the Texans' inability to see slaves for what they are, humans. For centuries since the first settlers came to Texas, bondage of slaves has been of vital importance to them. Presently, slavery is no more, as it was abolished in 1865. But the mindset of the pre-Civil War and maybe even present-day Texans still hasn't changed. They still have desire for slaves. Simply put, the Texas Revolution was a result of a sick admiration for slavery. Me ven y me preguntan